Hello everyone, let's talk about World of Warcraft. Recently, Bellular and Asmongold and some other, World of Warcraft streamers and influencers have been discussing what has been going on with World of Warcraft. New announcements seem to have everyone excited. But there is some concern because there are weird things going on in the game that have people a bit confused. Although I haven't played many hours of it myself, I have listened to some of these critiques and I wanted to weigh in with some very specific information that maybe should be considered as we look forward to the future of WoW. I missed out on the WoW train, but I have recently attempted to get into it and failed. There are reasons for this, and it is tangentially tied to what I think is going on here. So let's talk about it. So let's first begin with discussing what is actually happening. Bellular made a little list. Basically, the trailers don't feel as cool. The story seemed to surround relationships and emotions and feelings. The models are looking softer or more, let's say, air quote, attractive. And there are moments between characters that make some of the newer characters feel like Gary Stews or Mary Sues. So what is going on here? There are three basic things that could be happening. Once again, I can't say for certain, but let's get theorizing, shall we? Number one, we could say that the writers are just not very good. Number two, we could say that the writers are writing from a space that is more feminized. And number three, we could say that the writers are seeking a new audience, females. Okay, now there are levels of probability for these theories. There's a higher probability, for example, that the writers are struggling or are not as well equipped for the story for a variety of reasons. But it is equally possible that Blizzard Entertainment wants to get some of that sweet, sweet Candy Crush, sweet, sweet June's Journey, Love Nikki, Genshin Impact money. And one of the best ways they can do it is by, angling the story and the character models towards what they think might start luring in a larger female fan base. I think this is a losing battle and is a waste of time for them. But hey, let's get more into these theories and try to explain what might be going on. Now, before I begin, I need to preface this with some obvious statements. Number one, I am a woman. Number two, I am also a writer. I work as a ghostwriter professionally, and I have had some experience now writing for myself and for others, and I can definitely tell you that just because you are a woman or just because you are working from a more feminine creative space doesn't mean that, you can't write something good or meaningful. However, when you have a certain game or IP, you need to be very cognizant of what kind of creative energy you're bringing to the table. And therefore, I'm not trying to say here that certain modes of narrative or certain types of writers are bad. What I am going to suggest is that some specific IPs are going to need a very specific approach, and not all writers should be writing for those IPs, if that makes sense. All right, let's talk about the theories. The first theory is that writing is crap. So, for example, the lore might be good, but how is that lore being shared narratively? That might be poorly done. Maybe the themes and the narrative plot are poorly planned. There might be plot holes, long-term plot holes that are just not making sense to people who are playing the game. If you are someone into extreme lore, you can sometimes forget that lore is actually not a story. Lore is just information. Lore is encyclopedic data. And so it might be amazing to have all this lore, but what's the point, really? And so if the story doesn't make sense, then the lore just gets hidden and nobody's going to be able to access it. And of course, if you have crappy writing, not only is the lore going to be underutilized and poorly utilized, not only is the plot going to be contrived, poorly planned, poorly organized, maybe too linear, too simplistic, but the mechanics, the actual writing itself, might even suffer with very simplistic sentences, weird modernized dialogue in what should be a more fantastical setting, and all of this can basically bring down an entire IP. And generally speaking, I would say that if you have too many writers, if the vision isn't coherent, if the writers haven't read enough of that specific genre, if the writers haven't dabbled in really good classical books, if they don't have enough imagination, if they are just a poor fit for that specific genre, you're going to automatically just get really, really crappy writing. Examples of this, for example, would be Rings of Power, most Asian MMOs, and even the difference between Starfield and Cyberpunk should highlight how if the right writers are on the job, the writing is going to be very visceral and very real and appropriate for that genre. And if the writers are poorly educated or are not experienced enough or haven't been mentored adequately or have not done their research or who do not respect the genre, they're just not going to bring that level of writing that the fans are looking for. And like I said, there are many reasons why crappy game development happens. You can watch my Baldur's Gate 3 video on that, and I think it would apply to this theory of just bad writers, bad writing. And there are other theories, though, that fascinate me even more, specifically because of what Bellular noted. It got me thinking, so maybe what's going on here is that the writing space of Blizzard Entertainment for WoW has shifted from a more masculine creative headspace, more masculine energies, into something more feminized. And this might be linked to some hidden agenda to draw in more female gamers. So let's talk about what does narrative look like when it's written from a female or feminized headspace. So once again, this is not to say that men can't write like this. There are men who will write from a feminized energy creative space. So this is not a diatribe against female writers. There are fantastic female writers out there who can write really hardcore stuff. This is all about the aim and the audience, or sometimes the sensibilities of the writers involved. Okay, so what does this look like? Well, narratives that are defined by a more feminized creative energy generally are more invested in relationships, in feelings, in heartwarming scenes, in people unpacking their psychological journey. And generally speaking, female interests have really kind of focused on social and linguistic aspects of culture. And there are reasons, biological reasons, why women are more invested in finding out what a person is thinking or feeling, probably most likely due to the fact that women rely more heavily on social hierarchy for security, and evolutionary theory and all that. And there is a book called A Billion Wicked Thoughts by August and Gadam, who looked at the difference between female and male desire and how it is propagated through media. And so, for example, if you are writing a story with a sex scene for women, it's going to look different than if you're writing a story with a sex scene for men. The focus is different. There's even a difference in porn that's filmed for women versus porn that's filmed for men. And so this will naturally trickle down into other forms of writing or forms of cultural expression. So how women approach it is going to be different. Does this mean it's bad? No. But does it mean that it's always appropriate for specific cultural experiences? And the answer is no. Sometimes you need to have something different. So for example, if a man was hired to write for a female-focused TV show, let's say the CW Flash, which does a great job in what it's attempting to do, which is hold the interest of 20 to 40-year old women. And it does a great job with that for the most part. I pieced out after like 4 or 5 seasons because the amount of illogical behavior and emotions just got too much for me. However, it really does work well. It has an audience. So if these writers are writing from that kind of headspace, that's fine if they're working for that kind of a product that is going to be consumed by and for women, and it doesn't matter if you're a male writer or a female writer or whatever. You will need to write like that in order to draw that audience in the same way, if you are writing for something that's more hardcore or for a more male-dominated audience, for example, WoW, you are going to have to write from a more masculine energy, creative kind of space. You are not going to want to sit around and have people talking about their feelings. That's just not... You can do it in small bits. Men aren't heartless. Men aren't, men are on a journey to individuation, which involves them learning to appreciate emotionally intimate scenes. But you're certainly not going to bog down your entire narrative with having people standing around talking like they just came out of Friends or Sex and the City or whatever. So my experience as an atypical female writer, I've had these kinds of struggles when I was ghostwriting romance stories because I'm not very romantically minded, and I really struggled with kind of getting that psychological and emotional truity that most female audiences required. And a lot of my editors and a lot of my clients would come back to me and be, saying, this writing is fantastic. Mechanically, it's great. But I just don't feel like I'm connecting with the man or the woman in that scene. And so I've had to really work hard on that to kind of gain that kind of softness and that willingness to linger and wallow in this kind of goopy emotion, what I feel to be goopy emotion. Women enjoy it, right? So I personally think it is very possible that for some reason, maybe because they're trying to draw in a female audience, Blizzard has allowed their writing team to drift into some kind of feminized mental headspace. And I respect that headspace. I think that's a great space to work from, but it may not be actually what WoW needs right now. They need to toughen it up. They need to grit it up. They need to show the dragon killing the cowboy mole people. They need to make it really impactful for their male viewers. And why do I say that? Because I personally think they should respect that space and kind of keep it alive for the general male audience that it was initially intended to draw in. Now, of course, women should be welcomed and should enter that space as much as they want. And indeed, from what I understand, there are other creatives out there who are women. There are creatives out there who are females who are very invested in creating those spaces for both men and women who want to enjoy a more visceral experience, shall we say. And I will say that there are female gamers who want to enjoy WoW that way. They don't want WoW to be dumbed down or to be removed from that kind of darker fantasy genre. They want to keep that feeling alive. And so it doesn't really matter whether you're a male or female gamer. If you're there in WoW from the beginning, from the sounds of it, it seems like a lot of really cool things happened where people were dying and everything. And I really feel that whether you're a male or a female, you want to see that. You don't want that to be drifting off into some sort of rom-com stupidity. Okay? There are other games that you can do that with, like visual novels and all that like. So I personally think that Blizzard's approach to writing as it's standing right now isn't going to work long term. Basically, you have all of these men who may or may not be in a psychologically mature state. They're not going to appreciate these emotionally intimate scenes. Now, some of them might appreciate it in small doses, but if it just goes on and on, they're just going to end up clicking through the story, and you will not be able to retain players like on a psychological and emotional level, because there will be zero investment because the story is just being ignored. I will also say that even if you were to make this writing all goopy and kind of, emotionally charged and all that, you're still not going to attract your average female. Your average female is playing Candy Crush, merge games, visual novels with 2D graphics, Love Nikki. If you don't know about Love Nikki, well, anyway, moving on. You're playing June's Journey. You're not going to want to play something like WoW just simply based on graphics and the skill level required. All right, so you load into WoW, you're going to see a weird hotbar. You're going to see weird tiny text boxes with barely legible words. You're not going to easily figure out how to upscale those dialogue boxes so you can read everything properly. The story is going to set you in the middle of something that you barely understand what's going on. Who is your character? What is this person? What's going on? The graphics are going to look really weird and lame, frankly. And the potential glamour system, while cool and appropriate for the original intended audience, for modern female audiences who want highly detailed, highly stylized, a huge gamut of fantasy to modern wardrobes and glamours, it's just not going to cut it. Let's all be real here. It's just not going to cut it. And it's just not going to bring in those newbie female MMO players. And this is where my experience with WoW kind of comes in. I went into WoW, I think 2 or 3 times trying to attempt to get in here because I knew it was famous. I knew everyone loved playing it. I wanted to find out what it was. The fact that you have to start a new character to play a different class was, just not working for me. The graphics were meh. The casual side was not easily accessible. Just the whole look and feel of the game was a bit off. And then I heard about the griefing if you were on the wrong server, and then the fact that your classes are locked to your race, and the fact that you couldn't really do housing, and it just became very hard for me to want to invest time. And the fact that the free trial is minuscule and tiny and just total limp dick. I tried so hard. Maybe I'll do a video in depth of my first attempts at playing WoW and my most recent attempt at playing WoW and why it failed. But anyway, this is just my opinion, my experience. I play Final Fantasy XIV, and I think you should therefore know right away exactly what I'm talking about here. Because even though I consider myself to be fairly atypical as a female gamer, I still have those moments where I am a woman, right? And I want something that looks graphically really cute and approachable. I want a leveling system that is very slow and simple, and I want to have endgame that is varied and not focused just on raiding and PvP. So what should Blizzard do instead? Okay, what should they do instead? So first, they should hire writers with strong writing experience in high fantasy or gritty modern fantasy. So if these new writers that they would presumably hire come in without having read like a basic list of 50 books that they need to have read, then they should not be hiring those writers. Like, stop it. Don't hire writers who haven't read anything. And you'd be surprised how many people want to write something. They have this idea, right? They sit down, they watch Wheel of Time, they watch, some new Netflix show, or like they watch The Witcher. They come away and they're like, oh, I have a fantasy book idea. And then when, they're they're asked, hey, what fantasy books have you read? They're like, oh, I don't know. I just saw this on like Amazon. I saw Rings of Power and I thought it was cool and this is my idea. And I'm just like, oh gosh. So yes, I've worked with clients like that before. And it just is something that happens, right? Like, don't hire writers who haven't done their reading. And you should, this is kind of like linked to it. You should require writers to do a minimum of reading before writing in terms of the game itself. They need to have all of their lore under the belt. They need to know how characters should be behaving so that everything is, consistent. Number 3, they need to focus on delivering gritty narratives with some heart. So don't overwhelm these viewers with unnecessary emotional, tangential rhetoric. Have peppered throughout the story meaningful, intimate interactions. And by intimate, I'm not talking about sex, I'm not talking about kissing or whatever. I'm talking about emotionally connecting scenes that help drive the characters forward in a meaningful way without being too heavy or long-winded or, just meandering. Number 4, there should be a single strong narrative through line that is more episodic in nature per expansion. So stop trying to be like Final Fantasy XIV and have an overarching narrative. Stop doing it. Okay, just do episodic. This is one expansion. Play this expansion. You don't need to know anything else going on really in the other expansions. If you want to have an overarching plot like Final Fantasy XIV, you're going to, number 5, you're going to need to hire architectural writers. So a lot of writers these days talk about writing like, oh, I just sit down and I start typing on the document and it just comes to me. These are what I call gardeners or, organic writers. And they're fine. But for high turnover rate, in terms of long-term organization and building in foreshadowing and clues to hidden mysteries, organic gardeners are just not what you should be hiring. If you want to write something like Dorothy Dinette's book, House of Nicolo, or Stephen Erickson's Malazan Empire, you need to have writers like that. You need to have writers who can sit down, make timelines, build in foreshadowing, put in clues, organize the writing, and then hold to that track of writing, hold to that outline. So get architectural writers like yours truly. And then number 6, you need to cut down the amount of writers to encourage a singular vision. I've been hearing stories about these Hollywood writing rooms and they sound like hellholes. I think this is yet another example of the writing space being overtaken by too much feminine creative energy, where it's like, oh, we're all going to the bathroom together and we're all going to do this together, girl, because we're all friends, right? And I'm just like, no. I like writing on my own. Leave me alone. I don't want to hear from anyone until I'm done my writing. So this kind of like Hollywood-esque, I think it's a California thing, and it's just spread up the East Coast where you have all these creators who want to get chummy while creating. I'm more into the auteur vision, a singular vision. There's one person who knows what's supposed to be happening, and everyone else is just writing their bit. And they're not sitting around going, oh, and then we can do this, and then we can do that. And it's like, oh, Lord. Like, maybe there's, like, some room for brainstorming that can happen, but too much of it ends up creating this kind of, like, weird, infantile, high school, like, I don't know if anyone's read fan fiction, but, like, oh, gosh, it just can get really bad. If you have too much of that running around, it actually seeps into the writing. And it makes it very much like a Will and Grace thing or like a Big Bang Theory thing. And once again, I have great respect for these major brands and IPs that have done very well. There's a reason why major brands and IPs like Sex and the City and Friends are so popular around the world. However, for certain kinds of productions, you just can't do that. Like, you got to stop. Number 7, ensure writers have read and or played the entirety of the whole game. So they need to even know what the game is and what the game could be. Because let's say a writer says, oh, I want to do a side quest where you have to do like 6 of these little stories that are going to be intertwined, and there's like this big little boss that you have to fight on your own, but maybe we should do it with like 4 other players. So this is where writers can actually help understand the limitations of what the developers can do, and also where they could maybe push the development in a positive kind of way. And so once again, if the writers haven't played the game and they don't understand how to play the game, they're going to just have very basic point and click, kind of like fetch quests and kill quests and stuff, instead of really kind of maximizing their writing in tandem with what the developers can actually do. Number 8, clean up any writer's database that might exist for writers. So if there's a database of characters and events and other important things, it needs to be cleaned up, it needs to be cleared out, it needs to be made easily accessible so that everyone can easily type up, oh, I'm going to need this character in the scene. Let me do a quick refresh of what that character is all about. Number 9, with new writers, start them off with smaller side projects before attempting a major quest line. So maybe this is already happening, I don't know. But definitely in Final Fantasy XIV CBU3's team, there would be writers who would come to the fore over time after doing side content. So Ishikawa did not come out of nowhere and just start writing Shadowbringers. She first actually did stuff like the Dark Knight side quest and some of the Stormblood stuff before finally taking over, as the major writer for the game. So once again, you don't become a writer overnight. You got to work yourself up to larger projects. And so once again, if you're a newbie writer, take on smaller stuff and just really learn how to craft small narratives first. And finally, number 10, don't lock the narrative behind side content. Keep the majority in the main quest and use side content and quests for more story invested players or people who want to grind. And this also ties into this whole thing I've heard about WoW, where they are putting a large portion of the MSQ into books. And I know that's a sales gimmick to get more money from the fans, and I think it's kind of disgusting, honestly, because then you're expecting people to go out and buy this extra large book that might cost more money, especially this day and age. Books can be quite expensive. So basically, I would avoid that. Leave any publishing to like side characters or side events that have no real impact on the large main story quest, and just fill out your world even more with all that side content. I think that would be fine and totally appropriate. And finally, I want to do a little reality check for maybe any writers who might be listening in on this. There are sometimes going to be projects and jobs that you should simply not do as a writer. Maybe your personality doesn't fit the genre. Maybe you haven't had enough experience writing for the genre. You haven't read enough for the genre, or you don't respect the genre. Either way, if that's the case, you have 2 options, okay? Number 1, you get a new job. Leave. Don't stick around. You're just going to drag everything down. And I know that sounds harsh, but you got to do what you got to do. And maybe that means that you aren't going to be able to get back into your writing career. You're going to have to end up working at a coffee shop or a factory or something for a while. Don't ask me how I know that, but you got to do what you got to do. Make those financial choices for yourself. But if you are literally in a working space where you are paddling against a current and there's no way for you to turn around and go with the flow, then get out. Get out. It's not worth it. It's not worth it for you. It's not worth it for everyone else. Or number 2, get with it. Okay? Get in the flow. Start doing research. Think about it as a job. Be professional. Even if you don't like necessarily what you're writing, just start writing. And you can start practicing on the side and start reading as much as you can so you can get into the headspace where you can basically fake it until you make it. And if you really need that money and you really need that job, then that's what you got to do. That's what everyone else does. Like not every accountant or construction worker or, soldier or police officer or doctor gets up and goes, oh, this is my dream job and this is a perfect day. There are going to be days when you're going to get up, you're not going to be in the mood, or there are going to be times when you're going to be working at a job that's less than optimal, that's not exactly what you want to do, but you got to do it for the dough. And while you're doing it, be professional, be respectful. This is a space that you have been invited into. You are here hopefully temporarily, or you just need to give yourself time to actually enjoy it and develop a taste for it. So if it's too much of a stretch to create something, just, find another job if you can. Otherwise, be humble, learn, stretch yourself as a writer, develop a new taste or new sensibility, and you may discover that you have found something that you really enjoy. So overall, I think WoW is making a mistake here. They are taking away a very necessary space from their original gaming base, and I do think the numbers dropping off. Apparently, WoW used to be like earth-shatteringly huge, and I think two things may have happened. Number one, WoW may have become too diluted over time so that the original fan base is just gone. Or maybe, and this is very sad to say, maybe the cultural trends have shifted to something else, and WoW is simply a relic. In which case, WoW should slowly wind down operations for its game and start fresh with something entirely new. Then if they began something new, they would have a chance to revisit their systems, to revisit their policies around add-ons, to revisit how they go about telling stories, and they could actually even revisit how they approach casual content and draw in more female players. They may be able to draw back their old male players who have since become dads and don't have the time to endlessly grind punishing systems. So whatever the case is, WoW either needs to return to its roots and reclaim what it's lost, or it needs to realize that it is a dinosaur and needs to be, taken out to the shed and, rise from the ashes as something else. I don't have the answer for that because I'm not really invested in that IP per se, but I just wanted to give some of my more specialized knowledge feedback concerning these weird, air quote, weird changes that have been happening. I think these changes are coming from perhaps a team that has been revolutionized by a more feminized creative headspace, and this is causing the whole focus and direction of the stories into something that is less than attractive for the original intended audience, both male and female gamers. And it could also be linked to the overall dropping standards in writing. Overall, there are a lot of people who have no respect for canonical literature. They have no respect for elevated fantasy or mythology or Jungian archetypes. They don't know about that stuff and they don't care. And we know from, supposed rumors about the staff writing the Witcher show at Netflix that sometimes there is a kind of like an arrogance of, we can do this better, and it's just very disrespectful to the original work. So whatever is going on at WoW, it needs to change, because I do think if it continues on, Bellular and Asmongold and others are going to eventually just drift away into variety gaming, and WoW will never take center stage again. And maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. But definitely I do feel like a lot of these streamers and influencers do seem to be vocalizing some concerns about the direction of the game. And I wanted to hopefully elucidate some reasons why it might be happening. It's maybe not as mysterious as everyone thinks it is, and it is actually something that can be rectified and reversed. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know if you think I'm just crazy or just talking about stuff I have no business talking about. But there you go, and I'll see you all around next time.